Hi there. My name is Mark Wilbur. I used to be an English teacher in Taiwan. After college, I lived there for 7 years. I worked as a teacher, as a manager at an EFL school, and then later I was a partner at a school where I made the curriculum, hired all the teachers, did all the teacher training. And I have decided I would like to share some of the things that worked for me as a teacher and as a curriculum designer in the past. Um, what I'm planning on doing with this program is sharing how I taught phonics, or I should say it's more like an ear training what I did. I turned around the way phonics is usually taught. Um, what I did was I taught common spelling rules or spelling patterns, and almost every class at the lower levels, I made students spell words they had never heard before. Obviously, I would accept anything that's phonetically equivalent. So if I tell them, I want you to spell the word bite, and they spell B-I-T-E, that's fine. If they spell B-I-G-H-T, also good. I'll give them credit for it. So what this did was two things. One, it let the students take advantage of the fact that unlike their native language, Chinese, English is extremely phonetic. So if they learn a lot of spelling patterns, then they can read Dr. Seuss books that have lots of words they've never heard before, and even imaginary animals like a yink. But if they know an INK is an ink sound, then they can figure out why INK is a yink, and um, they can learn all kinds of interesting things. And by reading more, they see more English culture, and it's also more fun than just going through a dense essay with a whole bunch of words they don't know every time. So, in the process of teaching these spelling rules, I obviously spent a lot of time thinking about English spelling and phonics on a level that I hadn't done before as a native English speaker. I mean, there were things that I wasn't aware of. And it was not the easiest sell to use this in the school that I was managing the academic side of. A lot of parents, especially in Asia, really want their kids to do well on spelling tests, but they don't really care so much about um, having a great grasp of how phonics works in general, or they care, but it's really secondary to the tests. But in the long run, I think the results were excellent, and I have a number of students and former students' parents who still contact me, and I was really happy with the results. So I know everyone has different opinions. There are more than one way to teach these things. I'm just going to share some of the patterns. I mean, they're not ironclad spelling rules, but some of the patterns that show up again and again and again. And I'll try to teach one each time. Hopefully I'll do this once a week, although if nobody watches any of them, then I'm probably not going to be motivated to keep on making these. Once I get through a few, then I'll explain more about how I did the spelling exercises for the students. I think that there is a lot to be gained by making students listen really, really carefully and try to figure out what sound was made. Because if you give a student, the words, male, pale, fail, and put them all in a row on a page, and they read them together, and you say, AI makes that sound, it'll have some effect. But if you're making the student listen really hard and trying to figure out which vowel sound it was, as well as apply the phonics patterns that they've learned, it trains their ears. And at least for me, like when I was learning Chinese or when I was learning Japanese, or now that I'm trying to learn some Cantonese, if I can't hear the difference between two sounds in a language, I have no hope of pronouncing it well. So the first spelling rule or spelling pattern that I taught my students was one that I heard when I was in kindergarten, and I think most native English speakers heard this when they were very young. And that's when two vowels go walking, the first one does all the talking. This means if you have two vowels together, like the O and the A in moat, you pronounce the first vowel as a long vowel and you don't pronounce the second one. Or if you have a vowel plus a consonant plus another vowel, like the word bike, you have B-I-K-E. The I is a vowel, K is a consonant, E is a vowel. You pronounce the first vowel, the I, as a long I, and you don't pronounce the second vowel at all. What I didn't realize about this spelling pattern before I started teaching English to non-native English speakers was that we don't use, or not every combination is common. So you'll see OA in lots and lots of words with long O sounds, but you won't see like AU together in a word with a long A sound, really. If you did, it's probably a loan word from a language other than French or German, or languages English gets most of its words from. So the common patterns are AI for a long A. That could be like male, pale, fail, or EE, or EA for a long E, such as meat as in meeting, or meat as in chicken or steak. Long I's are usually IE, and you see this a lot in past tense verbs like died, tried, tied. For long O's, as I said, it's usually OA. Long U's are actually not that often produced with two vowels together, but sometimes you see a word with U, E, like a Q, for example. And the vowel consonant vowel combinations are pretty simple. You have A, consonant E. Oops, need some more space here. We've got, for E, you actually don't see too many E consonant vowels. Oops. For I, it's usually I, consonant E. For O, it's also usually O, consonant E. And for U, it's also U, consonant E. Some examples here would be male, again, just a different word than this male. Pale, also different pale than this pale. Yeah, a lot of them. Gate. What else would be another? For I, consonant E, you've got tide. Once again, there are two words, tide. You've got like the past tense of tide, and you've also got like waves of water, a tide. O, consonant E, say note. U, consonant E, mute, mule. Anyway, those are the common ones. Of course, not every time there's a long vowel sound in English do we make it with these patterns, but it's very likely. So what I told my students to do is, if you hear a word that you've never seen before, take advantage of the fact that English is pretty phonetic. If you hear some word with a long A sound, there's a really good chance it's spelled with an AI or an A consonant E, and that'll help you when you're trying to look it up in a dictionary, or writing a note to remember it, or something like that. Like any sort of spelling rule, it's not going to be 100%. There are tons of exceptions in English. Unfortunately, we're not all learning Spanish. Well, fortunately for us English teachers, people are learning English, but for the learners, it would be a lot easier if it were a more consistent writing system. So, this is the low-hanging fruit. This is the first one I teach. Next week, I'll teach a different spelling pattern. As I said earlier, I taught these spelling patterns in the order that I thought they would be, okay, I taught them in order of how frequently they show up. So if it's something like being able to hear the long and short vowels, kids have to, or any students have to get that eventually. If you don't have that, then you're in big trouble. And other things like the Y's at the ends of words, like AY is an A sound, OY is an OY sound. That's also very common, so I taught it very early. Some of the other ones are less common, so I taught them a lot later. And then there are some that even most English speakers probably aren't aware of that are a bit of help if you're an advanced student, like say the accent stress difference between nouns and verbs, like reject or reject, that kind of thing. So I start with things that come up all the time, and then I gradually move to the less and less and less common things, and then after 3 semesters in my old school, or like say if it's an adult, like a conversation partner or something, I just throw these things out every once in a while when I notice them. But after a point, then obviously you have to just do a lot of reading and watch a lot of TV, watch a lot of movies, and just try to copy the native speakers that you know. And you can't, obviously you can't have any kind of rules, whether if they're grammar or phonetic rules that will let you produce everything in a language, because if you could, then Google Translate would actually be good for Chinese, and it's not yet. Anyway, next week I will teach the next spelling rule that I used to teach after the long vowel one. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to my blog, like the Tushul blog Facebook page, and yeah, I'll see you next time.